Hello, this is Dr. Mike, and I want to spend some time today talking to you about Chapter 2 of Ethics, which covers religion and global ethics and global thought. Quite an extensive chapter, and one in which we could spend a great deal of time, but I want to be as brief as possible as you study this week. Religion and global ethics are closely intertwined. So many religions have teachings and principles that relate to ethical behavior and moral values that it's important for us to understand. These are vitally important to our world that we live in. And so I wanted to spend just a little bit of time thinking about those. These teachings often address issues like justice and compassion, fairness, respect for others, which are central to the development of a shared framework of ethics for the world. And I think that's where our discussion really needs to be centered today, not on religion as a personal faith, which we all have. We've really never found a tribe that did not have some form of religious belief, but we do need to center, as we think about ethics, on how that religion or our belief systems could help us to reach more of a equitable status in the world as we live together. One example of the interaction of religion and global ethics is the Golden Rule that you know about. That is not a verse in the Christian Bible, by the way. The Golden Rule says, "Do unto others as you would have them to do unto you." It's found in many religious traditions. The Golden Rule states that one should treat others as they would like to be treated. It emphasizes the importance of empathy and compassion in our interactions with each other and with other groups outside of our own particular culture. Another example is the idea of social justice, which is a key concern in many religions. Social justice involves promoting equality and fairness and respect for human dignity. It often involves addressing issues like poverty, about discrimination and oppression. And unfortunately, many religions that we are familiar with in the West do not readily get involved in those things and when they should. Religion can also play a role in shaping global ethics by providing a moral compass or a set of shared values that can guide individuals and societies in their behavior. This is the idea that our founding fathers in America had when they talked about religion. Thomas Jefferson, who was a noted deist and not a conventional Christian, actually made the statement that if there was a purpose for religion, it would be to provide an ethical basis or a foundation by which people could learn to live and to treat each other. I think Benjamin Franklin probably would have concurred with that as well, since he came from that similar background. But learning how, having a moral compass to show us how, as individuals and societies, in our behavior. However, it is important for us to recognize that not all religions share the same ethical principles, and that there can be differences, there can be disagreements between religious traditions. Some are focused on one thing and some on another. In order to develop a truly global ethic, I think it's necessary to engage in dialogue and collaboration across religious and cultural boundaries and to seek common ground based on shared values and shared principles. One of the reasons why religion is probably not more effective in the world is that we don't talk to each other. We don't communicate. We don't major on the things that we share in common. We major on differences. And anytime we talk about differences, we're never going to come to any kind of consensus, because that only leads to argument and dissimulation. So it's important that we sit down and figure out what are our common beliefs, our common goals, and we can work together. This requires an open and a respectful approach to diversity, as well as a willingness to learn from and be influenced by different perspectives and different traditions. That's the main reason why I share the TED Talks with you, because you get to listen to different voices other than my own. You listen to a Muslim imam, you listen to a Buddhist priest, you listen to the Pope. We need to listen to various perspectives. We can learn from each other. We can learn things that will help us in developing a culture that will be affirming and not divisive and hurtful. And so we need that open and respectful approach to diversity in order to have for religion to benefit us in our discovery of ethics. Developing a global ethical perspective can be a challenging task because ethical values and principles can vary greatly across different cultures, different religions, and belief systems. However, it's important for us to strive to work at a global ethical perspective to promote fairness, promote justice, to promote respect for human dignity across different societies. We would have disagreements sometimes in how different religions relate to women, how they treat women, how they treat gay people, how they treat others. And we have some of that within our own cultures, within Christianity, that we need to deal with, because you don't get anywhere by this, by causing these groups to have a difficult time in survival. So our challenge is to understand the diverse cultural context in which ethical values are formed, and realize that different cultures have different norms and values and belief systems which can shape their ethical perspectives. For example, some cultures prioritize individualism and personal autonomy. Other societies will place greater emphasis on community, on collective responsibility. And so we need to understand these different cultural perspectives, that they're essential to developing a global ethical understanding of who humans are. Another challenge is reconciling conflicting ethical principles and values. For instance, the principle of autonomy may conflict with the principle of beneficence, which require that we act in the best interest of others. If you are overly individualistic, you don't believe or desire to help other people that have problems. By the same token, the principle of justice may conflict with the principle of mercy, which involves showing compassion. It's involved in giving forgiveness. Balancing these conflicting values and principles require careful deliberation and an appreciation for the complexity of ethical decision making. And so for that reason, we tend to not talk very much among religions. Religions do not have, very many interfaith or any inner meetings where they actually discuss the things like ethics and how we could help with that. Additionally, addressing power imbalances is crucial in developing a global ethical perspective. There's a big power dynamic that can influence the way that ethical decisions are made and implemented, particularly in cross-cultural contexts. Therefore, it's important to recognize the influence of power dynamics on ethical decision-making and work towards promoting more equitable and just systems. For instance, if a particular religion is dominant in a culture, they have certain rules, say about women, then you would necessarily want to discuss that. One of the more common issues today would be in a place like Saudi Arabia, where women are not permitted to drive, where women are not permitted to go into the public without a male member of her family as her minder. Those things, there's a lot of ethical issues there with women's freedom, like education. When we recently left Afghanistan, we had been there for 20 years. And during that 20 years, women had risen in the government to positions of judgeship and authority. Girls were allowed to go to school. The moment that we left and the Taliban retook the community, girls were forbidden to go to school. Women were removed from office and put back into the same situation they were 20 years ago. We should have great ethical concerns about that, and realize that even in America 100 years ago, there were a lot of restrictions on women that prevented them from being visible, being operative in government places of power. So those all have some kind of ethical ramifications. Many times it has a religion attached to it that makes it more difficult to solve those problems. So this challenge of reconciling ethical principles and values can have a pretty definite power dynamic attached to it that makes it difficult. Ultimately, developing a global ethical perspective is going to require an open-minded approach, a willingness to learn from diverse perspectives, and a commitment to promoting fairness and justice for everyone involved. Universal human rights, when we talk about those terms, human rights would refer to the fundamental rights and freedoms that every person is entitled to, regardless of their race, their gender, their nationality, their religion, or any other status. These rights are considered to be inherent in all human beings, and they include rights such as the right to life, the right to liberty, the right to security of your person, freedom of speech and religion, the right to a fair trial. These are just the very basic ethical premises that the world should be found upon. And from that, then, people can go out to have a better life. The term cosmopolitan, which you will see in your text as well, is a political and an ethical philosophy that emphasizes the idea that all human beings belong to a single global community, that each person has a responsibility to act in the best interest of the community at large. This is a very important term, but we're all citizens of the world. We all should act in the same way to make sure that we have, that things work equitably for everyone, and that's a big job. You often hear the term civil disobedience. It's a form of peaceful protest that involves intentionally breaking a law or disobeying a government order in order to make a moral or a political statement. In my lifetime, the most famous of those would be Dr. Martin Luther King's marches for civil rights. In fact, they marched against the laws of assembling together and literally brought the country to a point of accepting civil rights because of civil disobedience. Civil disobedience can be good, it can be bad. If it's not controlled, like the one we saw on January the 6th in Washington, that would be breaking the law. Those people should be punished and brought to justice. But by and large, the right to peacefully assemble, the right to peacefully protest, the right to make your voice heard in a democracy is at the heart of all that we do, and it should be in religion. Sadly, religions will tamp down, put a lid on any kind of dissent. They don't allow women to have any voice in the politics and the running of the organization, and this can be quite disarming. And so many religions don't discuss or don't come to terms on certain things that they want to discuss. And women's rights are really deplorable. I mean, this country in the 1970s, we had an equal rights amendment that was signed by the president and passed by the Congress and sent to the states to be ratified. They need 2/3 ratification for it to become a part of the Constitution. And one single Christian woman, Phyllis Schlafly, with Eagle Forum, literally took this on as her job to stop it, and she did. She went to every state that had already ratified it, caused them to rescind their ratification, and the Equal Rights Amendment for women fell in the dust and was never revived. So, ladies, 1998, the Southern Baptist Convention, which is the largest Baptist denomination in the world, reinforced their ideas that women should not be able to speak in church or to teach a class where there are males and females, because women are somehow less desirable for teachers than men. So you see, it's a modern thing. It's not, even in Christianity, we still have these rudiments that would hinder reaching an ethical understanding, and women get really, really abused. The term pluralism that you see also refers to acceptance and celebration of diversity in society. That includes diversity of cultures and religions and beliefs. And so a pluralistic society would be one that embraces differences and not fights against it. We're seeing that reversal in the last 5 years in America, where we've moved toward a pluralistic society, and now we're seeing those rights and privileges being pulled back and taken back, which is sad. Secularism, the term refers to the separation of religion and state, and the belief that political decisions should not be influenced by religious beliefs or practices. I doubt that's possible. I doubt that you can make a decision without your own personal ethics and your own personal religion coming into play, but as much as possible, it should be fair to all. We don't make laws, and we see this in the recent abortion overturn, and these states that have followed suit with making laws that make every aspect of abortion to be illegal. Even someone who drives an Uber to take a person to an abortion can be charged with breaking a law. But sadly, that shows you that secularism is a much better approach than to have religious controls or religious minders in the government. We talk about humanism, which is a philosophy that emphasizes the value and the agency of human beings, of individuals, alone and collectively, and generally prefers critical thinking and evidence. That is rationalism and empiricism. That you have evidence for what you believe over the acceptance of some church's dogma or superstition. And this came mainly with the Enlightenment, 1700s, 1800s, caused a lot of disruption, probably caused a major division within religion, so that you have some religions today that are tied to reason, to rationalism, to empiricism, and others that would be tied more to dogma and superstition. Eurocentrism, another term, refers to the tendency to view the world from a European perspective, to look through European glasses, perceive European culture and value and history over those of other regions, which would say that we believe that European white culture is the only one worthy of importance and the only one worthy of preservation. We see some of that going on in our country today. Another term in the text I want to remind you of is the divine command theory. It's a philosophical position that holds that an action is morally right if God commands it and morally wrong if he prohibits it. And that's interesting. Humanistic and religious approaches to ethics are two different approaches to understanding what is right and what is wrong. Humanistic ethics focus on human values and individual autonomy, while religious ethics are grounded in religious texts and beliefs. And you can think about that in relation to developing your own ethical belief. The chapter talks about Plato's Euthyphro. Socrates and Euthyphro discuss the question of whether an action is good because the gods command it, or whether the gods command it because it is good. The debate is known as the Euthyphro dilemma and raises questions about the nature of morality and its relation to religious belief. So as you read the text this week, read very carefully many of these terms you'll encounter. I want to just kind of give you a heads up about those as you begin your exploration of religion and morality. And when you get down to the end, reflecting upon the role of religion in your own life, informing your ethical beliefs, whether it's good or bad or where you got your ethics from, it's really good to think about the role of religion. Many of us come from very religious families. I was a pastor for 20 years, and my ethics changed at the end of that. When I stopped pastoring, it was a choice I made because basically I really got frustrated with the church being so segregated. There's nothing more white than a Baptist church on Sunday morning. The way they treated women, and that women were not able to hold office in the church, could be a deacon, could preach, yet they didn't mind working women to death to do the chores. And then lastly, the treatment of gay people, which I think is an abomination. If we claim to love people, we love them without exception. And if not, then there's something wrong with our teaching. We're not walking the talk, as young people say. Well, I hope you got something from our lecture today in chapter 2. I will look forward to talking to you next time. And until then, if I can help you, please let me know. Thank you.